Ahojte moji milí tretiaci, vítam vás na takej veľkonočnej hodine, buď pred alebo po sviatkoch máme. A je to možno aj také symbolické, lebo tému, ktorú pôjdeme dnes, protestantskú reformáciu vo Švajčiarsku, tzv. Kalvinizmus a následne náboženské vojny, tak práve Veľká noc ako kresťanský sviatok, jedným z mála, na ktorom sa zhodli aj evanjelici, aj kalvíni, aj katolíci, a predstavuje jeden z najväčších sviatkov pre kresťanov. No, čo to znamená pre vás, decka? Dnešnú hodinu, netuším, pokiaľ sa ešte za tú hodinu dostanem v poznámkach, ale môžem vám povedať, že v podstate z tej veľkej slidovej, 48 slidovej prezentácie my sme teda približne v tretine. No a uvidíme, pokiaľ prídeme. Ja tipujem, že ešte tomu venujem minimálne 1 hodinu, ale každopádne pre vás to znamená, že máte plus minus 2 až 3 týždne, keď skončíme túto tému, a mali by ste skončiť aj vy vaše zadania. A určíme si hneď v zápätí potom aj dátum odovzdania vašich assignments, vašich zadaní. Takže ja to tipujem tak na druhú polovicu až koniec apríla. No a preto prosím, pracujte poctivo, pracujte zodpovedne, aby ste mi to všetci stihli pekne poslať na čas a môžem vám to potom ohodnotiť namiesto písomiek, samozrejme. Známky budú, uvidím ešte ako, ale niekedy dávam viacej známok za každú tému, niekedy dám jednu veľkú, takže to sa ešte dohodneme, to ešte uvidíme. Dobre, nezabudnite, že máte teda odpovedať samozrejme aj na otázky, na zadania, ktoré som vám sem hodil, takže treba len na to zodpovedať a ideme ďalej. Okay guys, so I believe we can move on. So today's topic is Reformation, that was more radical, and we moved to Switzerland. Actually, as I told you, I added a couple of pictures. Actually, I'm still doing that, and for that reason I also added some map in here. So for you, if you're going to do these assignments with maps and with confessions and religions in various parts of Europe, so you probably may need this. We are moving to Switzerland. Switzerland was multicultural country, the union of more or less independent small states in the mountains of the Alps, or of free city-states and powerful city-states, not city-states but cities, medieval cities, in the valleys beneath the Alps, next to big lakes of Geneva, for example, and so on. So here people were a bit independent, not a bit, they were independent and neutral since 1291, if you remember from the lesson about German Empire, and they were actually they really enjoyed these ideas of Martin Luther, Lutheran and evangelical churches, but still as an more or less independent guys, they developed their own ideas, and within these things, there appeared two personalities that would be very important, and the first one was Ulrich Zwingli. Ulrich Zwingli was living in Zurich, that was German-speaking canton of Switzerland, and also the town, and it is the town, of course, and he came from this urban, very cosmopolitan area, which was more open-minded to these new ideas. And he quickly realized, sorry for that, I believe my voice will survive, will manage to keep all the lessons. So he actually challenged even the ideas of Martin Luther, because obviously from his point of view, from Zwinglianist point of view, Luther also picked up only the dogmas that he followed, he enjoyed, and for that reason he said that probably there must be some misconceptions in understanding the Bible. And just like in this picture, it is actually their meeting in 1521, I believe, in Marburg, for the invitation of local prince, where they were disputed, Luther against Zwingli, and they were opposing various dogmas which they didn't agreed upon. And for example, Zwingli, he also opposed purgatory, clerical celibacy, intercession of saints, but he proposed one important thing, that salvation is not only through only this belief, because you believe and do whatever you want to, okay? And even Luther was not proper guy, proper follower of the Christ. And Zwingli introduced one important thing, that hard work is one of the most virtue, the most honorable virtues of a man that can bring you to salvation, that can purify you from the sins you have. And this work, hard labor, uh, modesty, humility can bring you actually salvation through work itself. And being successful in your craft, in your business, for example, means that probably you work hard and you'll be actually saved even after life. Not you're not going to be rich in here. This is a very interesting thing, but somehow it is connected also with with the humanism as the ideology of those times, and bring something new that would be influential. Bedford Tingley, that he was influential only in Switzerland, maybe in France, and there were some small sects, attempts to create churches, but it was not very successful because even in Switzerland, there were of course many Catholics, and they clashed with battles with Zwinglians, Zwingli followers, and he was killed by Haldebeer, as you can see in this illustration, the picture. So in this battle against Catholics, Zwingli died, but what didn't die were his ideas um of this salvation through work and some new things that they start to interpret just with analyzing the Bible. It was not written in the Bible, but they explain it in this way. And for that reason, not new another very influential personality, a period that was influenced by Zwingli but also made some differences, but it was really successful, was Jean Calvin. Jean Calvin, or in English because it's widely popular, widely used, this personality, John Calvin, was a French. He was not a Swiss, and because of his ideas, of these Protestant ideas, general ideas that he started to develop, if like Luther is not a saint, he's not a prophet, he's not an apostle. Why not to challenge his ideas and not to change it? So he was persecuted in France, and he escaped to French-speaking, thus Francophonic canton of Genève in Switzerland. And he introduced here in this town, he started to spread his ideas, and they actually established new branches of Christianity. So what were these? So firstly, he was strictly anti-Catholic. So he refused, of course, everything that Luther and Zwingli did, but also he disagreed with Luther's salvation through the faith alone. What I told you, and this was inspiration from Zwingli. But even it was not only work, he said, and he was thinking. This is just analysis of the Bible, of the ideas. Um, Probably, not probably, but if God is real, what they believe, if God was real, He's Almighty, and because He's Almighty, He knows. Probably they suppose it was Him, that what happened before and what will happen, what shall happen. That's why when you're born, he probably knows if you're going to be doomed to burn in hell or to be saved in heaven. So he said that salvation is through the predestination. It means everybody got his or her own destiny also. And predestination is predurčenie. So you are, at the birth, it is decided whether you go to heaven or to hell. So for this thing, there is kind of this foreknowledge of the God as one of the character traits of the Almighty God. So he knows, the God knows everything what will happen in your life. So what can you do? Okay, I steal something, I offend my friend, or I don't know, I do some small crime, so I go to hell and I burn? No, they said that still, God knows it, but you you don't know what will happen. And still, if you did commit some crime, some sins, still you can purify your life. And this is something he took from Zwingli, that you can purify life with a better approach, a life that is sinless, and it is kind of the example of Jesus Christ or hermits from Middle Ages, from medieval times. So that for that reason, he promoted no drinking, for example, no drinking alcohol, because you got rid all the obstacles, and uh, you just You just commit sins in this way. No swearing, even because God knows everything. He listens to everything. So even some bad words or God mentioned in as a curse, it is swearing, and it was not allowed. Card playing as part of gambling is of course like. Temptation, and it's one of the sins in here. Another thing is in here that even dancing, he said that there should not be dancing. Women should walk like 2 meters behind her husband. They should cover, actually, almost apart from faces, almost all naked parts, even their necks, because even neck can be like a target for lust, for of man. So in this way, that was very strict, but main part of this Calvinist, as it will be called later, Calvinist religion was self-discipline. So it means you have to be really strict in sending assignments to Breznoschak on time, for example, in waking up, getting up very early at 3, 4 a.m. I'm waking up at 5, for example, to go bed early, to have like regular timetable schedule what you do. And before you eat, you have to pray, you have to work hard, you have to feed animals, you have to do many things, pray often per day, but still work hard, because if you work hard, it is purifying you, because it's some kind of suffering, but at the same time, you create something for the happiness of your family, and for great development, raising your kids, and this makes God happy. So in this way, they start to call it work or Calvinist, or generally in USA, Protestant work ethic. So it means that being ethical, it means also be hardworking. Okay, be responsible in your duties that you have. And this is something that is really interesting, because if you analyze where Calvinism put their roots and was successful, was like dominant religion. So all these states, apart from these oil states, they are actually the richest countries in the world. Including from Canada, USA, there are like the Scandinavian, Benelux countries, Australia, New Zealand. All these countries have very big, large communities of Calvinists. Even Slovakia experienced actually short period of so-called Habans, Habani. We will learn about this, about Habsburg monarchy in Slovak language, and it was actually how to say helpful for the region where they stay in Záhorie and around Mijava, and it really increased the economy. So this is something interesting. Actually, generally, we can say that if you are successful in business, in trade, in organizing your community, in getting better, okay, improving the life of the others, so God is happy, and you can purify your life with a strict regime and strict Protestant work ethic. So as you can see, on one hand, it seems like really strict, but on the other hand, it helps personality people to self-develop. So this is really interesting to compare. Of course, yeah, in the eyes of Calvinists, as so-called, so Catholics look like lazy, and Lutherans too, because even Martin Luther, he was like a big guy with his wife that he married because they refused celibacy, so he had a lot of kids, and he was not like this typical, like Jesus Christ model, not at all. And he actually denied some of these ideas because German princes were okay with the situation. So I said, "You're not strict enough." In this case, Calvinists were more radical. So in this way, here in Geneva, these Calvinist followers started with persecution of Catholics, but also of Lutherans, both. And of course, they were not on like they didn't tell about them that they would be like witches or heretics, but they organized something like witchcraft trials with them, like black magic for them, So even Catholics for them. So in this way, it happened that, as an example, the Spanish physician Miguel Serreta, who is supposed to be uh, the first man who did autopsy, like I mean medical autopsy, because of course autopsies had been done before, but like in secret. And Miguel Serreta did like he wrote a tractate about it. Actually, the first guy who made a public autopsy for the first time was Johann Jan Jasenski from Bohemia. He was Slovakian, and he was actually rector of Karl's University in Prague. But he was executed because he was one of the organizers of the big rebellion of the Second Defenestration of Prague. And thus 30 years was start. And Miguel Serveta was just passing by. He was staying for one night or a couple of nights in Geneva, just like on his way somewhere. And they said he's a Catholic, and he did autopsy to the body, so he was burned at stake in Geneva. So people really got fanatic about this, and actually, even in the towns of people who opposed them, so they were being persecuted. So in this very strict atmosphere, we can say that. John Calvin, he created kind of theocracy in Geneva. So city hall, as you can see, the leaders of the town were actually priests of Calvinist religion who promoted very strict behavior rules and code of behavior for the population, for Genevieve. And between these like more than 20 years until his death, the town was under leadership of Calvin himself. For that reason, Genève because became actually the kind of model Protestant training center. So many people who heard about this, so they came to Genève and they studied his ideas, and they then spread it further back. They came back home and spread it further to Europe and even over the world. So in this way, for many of the religions that I mentioned before in talking about these uh, European religions, was that Calvinists are really influential. What is more complicated for you is that they were called, and they are called with various names, and each country is different. And you should know it because you're going to travel a lot in your lifetimes. I believe you will visit almost all the countries listed in here, for example, and probably it will be good for you to know the people and know their history and understand maybe this working ethic, Protestant ethic, or apart from probably Hungarians, that is a bit different. They're too Eastern European style, kind of like different attitude. So of course it started in Switzerland with Jean Calvin walking the streets of Geneva with these elders and people admiring him. But of course they had to change the dress code, like in this picture that you cannot see. These guys like black and white only, so they were called Calvinists, just followers of them. But even Calvin probably didn't want the others to call to be that this religion should be called again according to him. He said they don't need even to create a church, because even Evangelical Church of Augsburg Confession means that you create some other authority that should like explain and transform God's words and Jesus and Bible to the people. And he said no, even people, if they work alone, if they read Bible, if they pray a lot, they do not need any church. For that reason, you can actually purify your life by yourself. And even the church, if you organize some community going to the church, to the temple, that must be really like simple without any decoration and no gold. Even crosses are maybe one cross on the wall, but wooden, not golden one. So for that reason, you can purify and you can elect actually your own leader of the church. And the leader of the church is a priest who takes care of the church of the community. But the preacher can be actually anybody from the crowd. Have you seen The Simpsons? How many times Homer asked to give a sermon, like to read from the Bible? And that because they are Methodists, and this is one branch of this Calvinist religion. So they elect their own like leaders of the church, but it could be even women, and later on of course, and they elected their own. So for that reason, for example, in England they start to be called with this name Puritans. You probably know it from this history of the New World of America, because these were these guys who came to America and established this colony in Plymouth in Massachusetts. And for what reason? Because they were Calvinists and they were being persecuted in England, then in Netherlands for a while, but still too radical. So they decided to move on from England to the New World. In England, they were still really influential, and the name is from Latin word puritas, which means purity. čistotníci. Okay, so that was from these Puritans. They were really influential and really radical. With also introduced witchcraft trials in Salem. The Scarlet Letter story by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and so on. Scotland introduced also other form that is interesting because Scotland was purely Catholic country and remained for many years. But later on, slowly, gradually, Calvinists got in here and it spread it by famous preacher John Knox, who himself came to Geneva. And when I told you that Geneva was like model training center, in this college in Geneva, this is college of Calvin himself, where he was teaching these priests. And in Geneva, you can see statues of all the guys come bringing this Calvinism to France, to England, to Scotland. And John Knox started to call this Calvinist church or Calvinist branch Presbyterians. Presbyter, it is ancient medieval name for a religious teacher, for a priest that is teaching other priests. And he demanded that in the way our churches, our church communities are electing their own presbyters. Okay, so we can just pick up somebody because we like him. And I can be priest too, you can be priest, and whoever. So in this way, Presbyterians started in Scotland, despite Scotland was kind of semi-Catholic and semi-Protestant Calvinist, this Presbyterian. But what was important, many Scotsmen, together with many Irish who were Presbyterians from Northern Ireland, together with Puritans, were probably the biggest part of the settlements at the early periods of these English colonies in the New World, thus USA. And especially in East Coast, these Presbyterian communities spreaded these churches all over the United States. Now with the new names called like Baptists, Anabaptists, Habans, or Methodist Church. All these Calvinist churches that are very common in USA or in Canada were actually from Presbyterian Church. Of course, some of them mostly from Puritans, some of them from Reformed Church, because here in Europe, in other countries, they started in Netherlands, in Holland, then again in Sweden, for example, in Norway, they just call it the Reformed Church. Because they didn't protest against anything, they were not evangelicals. They didn't want to be called Puritans or Presbyterians. They said we are just reforming the church. That's all. So they start to call Reform Church. Reformovaná církev is another word, and they are not evangelicals, they are not Protestants, they're actually Puritans, but their name is Reform Church. So that's why this assignment, this task with this family tree or Venn diagram of religions and confession is a bit tricky because you may confuse Reformed Church with Protestant Church, which is not. Okay, in Netherlands that was interesting. This Dutch Reformed Church, they're thinking, okay, but who should organize it? Okay, preachers themselves. So when they saw inspiration in England that we are going to talk about soon, that the king, Henry VIII, proclaimed himself to be the head of the church. When there is no pope, there is no patriarch. So I shall be the guy who is like protecting this church as the king. In Netherlands, the king was elected by a big council of cities and region states of these United Provinces of the Netherlands. From that reason, even King of Sweden and King of Denmark proclaimed their own supremacy authority over the Reformed Church, and that's why these Scandinavian countries became Calvinist too, but in this way more open-minded. But it's probably case of history and also of climate, okay, and probably lack of women because that makes you like better man, okay, because you have to try hard. Okay, so that was Reformed Church. What is interesting that even in Slovakia, if there are any Calvinists in Slovakia in this census, čítanie ľudu, čo ste si asi aj robili, so you could claim for a Reformed Church. You couldn't find like Puritans or Calvinists, but you can find, or Huguenots, but you could find Reformovaná církev na Slovensku, who are Calvinists, which is interesting. Only few maybe Slovaks, but mostly they are typical for Hungarians in Slovakia. So this typical identity feature, identity trait. Okay, well, soon, just after this slide, probably I will be talking about France. And in France, they had specific name that I always gave a bonus activity to find out the etymology of this word called Huguenot. Huguenot, this French pronunciation. Be sure, even in English, you should use this French one. Huguenots were just Calvinists, and their name was according to region and local name from southern France. Because, as I said, that Calvin himself was Frenchman. He came from France, so logically, people from his region start to read it, analyze it, and accept his ideas. And because they came from this region of Ug, so they start to be Huguenots, but at the same time it means like peasants or something like that. Actually, there are many various names, but I mention talk about Huguenots, I will be talking about Calvinists. Fun fact, when we talk about the New World, you know that French settled along the Mississippi River and Missouri River. You can find St. Louis or like Midwest of USA pretty known, and they got like baseball or basketball teams. They are called like Huguenots, like war sport name, okay, for them. In Germany, they adopted just like this Dutch reform, so they call it like only the Reformed Church, and this is the way how it came to our lands, to Kingdom of Hungary, to Habsburg lands. Of course, during many Habsburg Catholic emperors. They were being persecuted, but sometimes they were like periods of more tolerance, more open-minded form. And for example, some of the most radical guys from this Presbyterian called Anabaptists that even refused baptizing the kids, babies. They said that only when the kid or maybe teenager is big enough to read Bible, to understand it, and to talk to presbyter and explain why he want to become a Christian, then he can be baptized. So he understand it, and that's why. Okay, guys, sorry for short interruption because my timer got broken. I don't know why. So I will just continue with my lesson, and I believe after this 32 minutes, remaining 32 minutes, I will be able to put these two parts of the video together. Okay, so I'll try to move on. I believe I was talking about the Calvinist churches. Later on, to understand, I was speaking like half an hour about French and English Reformation. So sorry for that. So I'm coming back to that moment when here in Hungary we had this Anabaptist church that refused baptism because they, for example, had an issue that even Jesus decided baptizing when he was adult, and he was clever enough, so they did it too. Many things I will explain later on, and let's move on to the country that is next. Okay, Reformation in France. As I have already told you, not all the French supported Protestantism. Evangelical church was logically not very popular because they didn't speak German. But what was popular, and they could understand, were ideas of Jean Calvin. So Calvinism was popular. And as I have told you, they were called Huguenots due to the region in southern France where they were also the largest territories of their supporters. The kings of France at the time, who may decided about whether they may be tolerated or not, who were from the house of Valois, and there was Francois the First. Francois the First was a Catholic, but he started a nice tradition. That despite his Catholicism, he protected Huguenots because he said if the subjects, the vassals, are loyal, that's more important than to be Catholics, you know. So for that reason, he seized support from Huguenots too, and he as a Catholic, he didn't have problems. But in that case, it provoked many of the Catholics. The other thing was that uh, he picked up a wife for his son that was strong strict Catholic, and would have a huge impact upon the history of France in second half 16th century. That was this lady, Catherine de Medici. The Medicis were a famous family from Italian city Republic of Florence. You know, she came to France. She was like really descent over this tolerant attitude of the kings. And despite she didn't possess any real power, she managed to manipulate with her husband Henri II and her two sons Charles IX and Henri III in the way that they actually obeyed her, and she had a real power. She was this behind the power behind the throne. Under her influence, this Mother Queen Catherine de' Medici, she ordered strict persecution of Huguenots. Of course, it could be done in northern and central parts of France, but not in the south, where there was the most numerous, which caused actually 3 decades of civil wars. The climax was actually at the beginning, since like 1562 until late 1570s, until St. Bartholomew's massacre in the picture that I'm going to tell you more about, and ended up with the Edict of None, that was Tolerance Edict. So sorry for spoilers in here, but what was happening? So Catherine de' Medici, she actually manipulated her husband and her sons for the persecution of Huguenots, despite they didn't like it very much. They resisted, but she was real like harsh lady. And in this way, for example, Charles IX was really famous for during his reign was this massacre, but himself he didn't like it, and he really suffered maybe some schizophrenia or something. But as a king, he had the real power. And the movie that I recommended for you to watch is Queen Margot. It's really bloody about this massacre, but there will be nice scenes how they behaved actually, and how they lived. And in this way, Charles IX, for example, he had his wife, Catholic wife, and after his official hours, he went down to the basements of the castle, and where his real family, second and real family, was living, some peasant lady with his real children. And he just changed clothes from this beautiful Catholic, with accessories and ornaments, changed for simple clothes, and his wife made him some stew, simple stew, and he ate it with a wooden spoon. And on the other hand, for example, he had personal doctor, physician, Nostradamus, and probably you all heard about these prophecies of Nostradamus. And that was really interesting and cool. Of course, not all these prophecies came to be true, despite people still believe. But it was only when I read them, it was really so wide formulated that it can be applied to anything. If you're like wise historian and a doctor, that actually helps Charles IX. So that's cool. The other thing, that there were many charlatans at the time. Astrology and fortune telling was really popular. Our king and emperor Rudolf II Habsburg was really passionate about this, the stories, and we learn about it again. And when you are a good doctor, so you can even say some like fake things. But when you help people, they respect you, and that was case of Nostradamus. Now when you know this fact, you can become millionaires, because when like 15 years ago, this TV show Millionaire, that people have to guess some questions, multiple choice questions, they can win more and money, and getting the most difficult questions. So once or twice it happened that the guys, the competitors, got to the finals to for 1 million Slovak crowns question. And at the time, we were in High Tatras for hiking, and we're spending this evening in one terrible pub in Svit near Poprad. And I was just carrying beers when this like TV show was on, and there was millions question. So all the drinkers like got silent and listened to the question: of which French king was Nostradamus, like personal physician, personal doctor? And there were 4 possibilities: Philip II the August, you know him from Middle Ages, Holy Crusade. Philip IV the Fair, you know him also from Middle Ages, this like not a medieval king. Then Charles IX of Valois, and Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte was much later, and I could imagine Nostradamus with his typical Baroque or Renaissance clothes. That was this period. So just elimination. I just call it like held it like carrying beers from the bar to our table. I said like Charles the Nine. Charles, and it was Charles the Nine. So all the pub, all the drunks then tried to get me some beer and so on. But I was famous for a while. And this is why. What's the point? What's the aim of history? To win 1 million crowns. Thanks to this question. Okay, maybe this is just interesting stuff. But what is important for us. At the time, actually, the kings really had no power when Catherine de' Medici was alive. So for that reason, there was this. There were 2 families fighting, and in southern France, House of Bourbon, that was a noble family, very high noblemen that protected Huguenots, and they were Huguenots themselves. The other house that organized their armies was House of the Guise, and the Guise army was this main Catholic army. So they were fighting like Game of Thrones. Let me check if everything is recording. Yes, it is. So I am happy for that. I have no interruption. Sorry for that. And uh, what happened in here is that these two families were fighting for so many years that they started thinking about like ending the war, and they started with negotiations. And Catherine de Medici, she organized the wedding. That would be from like two young representatives of both families, both religions, and their unification in the marriage and the wedding would like bring final peace. The thing is that from the Bourbon family, there was one guy picked up who was at the time a very small kingdom of Navarra. You know that Spain at that time was mostly Catholic, but he was actually in exile because he was Huguenot, and his name was Henry IV of Navarra and the Bourbon. So his full name, Henry de Bourbon de Navarra IV. So he was offered to marry one of the members of the Guise family of the king's family, Queen Margot, and that's the movie about. They didn't like each other at the beginning. They were resisting because she was really free and she had a lot of lovers, and she didn't want this like witch, you know, an easy girl to be his wife as Huguenot Calvinist. But the point was that they had to accept it, sacrifice themselves for this, not expecting what would happen in Paris. Thousands of people are gathering for the royal wedding because usually people are giving wine for free and food for free. Even Huguenots were trying to protect the king because they didn't trust Catholics very much, but they promised them that nobody with arms, with weapons, can enter Paris. So everybody coming to the town had to give their weapons, sabers and rapiers and knives to the gates, at the gates to the guards. So there were people walking without any weapons, so they could feel safe. So there was big ceremony, big royal wedding, and during the night, when Catholics were drunk and Huguenots were sleeping even in the streets and in the crowded like taverns, so early in the morning, before the sunset, from the subterranean cellars of Paris, Catholic soldiers of the Guise army with halberds, rapiers, even with the clubs, they start walking around the town and killing everybody wearing black. Black clothes was the clothes were the clothes that the Puritans, the Calvinists, that Huguenots were wearing. They didn't want to wear it, show off, you know, their golden and ornamental clothes. So they were easy to recognize them. So everybody wearing was killed, either man, elder, woman, or a child. During the night of St. Bartholomew night of 1527, about 30,000 Huguenots were killed only in Paris, and another dozens of thousands in other parts of Paris or France, because there was big coordinated activity, the coordinated attack. The chronicle writers claim that River Seine was changed the colors of red and blue because of there were like thousands of dead bodies floating in the river down to the Atlantic Ocean. So this terrible night was kind of like one night genocide against this religious activity, and it was actually probably something that made French and consider this whether it is worthy. Of course, Henry IV during the night was taken from his bed and brought to the windows to see what is happening outside and to accept Catholic Church. Actually, some of the Guise soldiers, including Catherine de Medici, they didn't mind to kill him. But his new wife, Queen Margot, she actually stand and protected her new groom with her husband with her own still naked body. So that was actually interesting that it started like nice relationship between them, and he was offered that he will be spared his life when he accepts Catholicism and gives up Calvinist confession for what he did, and he becomes the king. from the Bourbon dynasty. This is the thing that this was the period only when Catherine de' Medici died, so the year should be even before. But this is the beginning of the Bourbon dynasty, and later on until actually 1789, 1791, when at the French Revolution, the whole Bourbon dynasty would be ruling. Maybe so. I should change the year, so it's not about this is actually his own rule, but I would add these numbers. So 1791 when Louis the 16th escaped the France and was later executed. So of course, this is the thing, but he actually managed to end the wars because when the king is Catholic, now the Guises are happy and Huguenots are okay because he still managed to use his influence to protect them somehow, despite Catherine de' Medici was not very happy about it. But once she died, when she was gone, her terrible witchy mother-in-law, so now he could rule like independently, and he didn't change, but he proclaimed something that was really one of the crucial events in French history and also for the history of many countries, was that he issued the Edict of Nantes. Nantes is a city in the coast of Atlantic Ocean in southern France, and the Edict of Nantes, takzvaný Nantes Edict, was act about religious tolerance in 1598. This was actually inspiration even for other kind of tolerance acts like Letters of Majesty of our King Rudolf II, even in Poland, Lithuania, they proclaimed religious tolerance. So for a while, for some couple of years and decades, Calvinists could settle down in these many countries, even there was like peace, but it brought to 30 years war and big changes later on. For that reason, when his son Louis the 14th, 13th and later 14th sought to reign, he was Catholic again. So Huguenots were being banished from France again, who traveled to the New World and sailed against the stream of the Mississippi, establishing St. Louis and many of these French names, the American cities in here. France does remain Catholic because most of the Huguenots just abandoned France. But France, since because of the Saint Bartholomew's Night massacre and the Edict of Nantes, of these two events, became kind more tolerant toward other religions because they knew what can it cause and what's the price. That is really really terrible. Okay, so let's move on. To England, and I have to check the time whether I have enough time, so I tried to manage it very quickly. Will not be speaking so much when it was not being recorded. England in here, and the famous king that you probably all know is Henry VIII with his famous six wives. But how it came to be, and we are not going to talk a lot about his family issues, despite its main motivation for him, but that was issue of faith, the matter of religion. When Henry VIII from the Tudor family, he was like the third Henry, and from the Tudors family, he was not interested in Reformation when it started. He was at the time like independent king, young one, like having a lot of lovers around and so on, but still strict Catholic. He was actually a typical man of Renaissance, that he was educated, literate, he was well read, and he had a hobby that he was writing letters to famous personalities of those times. He had, for example, like a letter correspondence with Erasmus of Rotterdam himself. That was really interesting. When he was actually criticizing him, and his most favorite pen friend was actually the Pope Innocent VI. And for that like kind of friendship and protection of Catholicism in England, Pope gave him a letter that he gave him his honorary title Fidei Defensor, which in Latin it means the defender of faith. Uh, that was beautiful, and even when, for example, English translation of the New Testament, just like in Germany, it was done from Greek version of this Erasmus of Rotterdam, and it was actually translated in Germany because this guy William Tyndale, who was could have been like persecuted in England, so he translated to English in Germany. So his copies, it was banned in England in 1526, and the copies of this English Bible, Tyndale's Bible, were being burnt because, from the point of view of Henry VIII, it was sacrilege not to use Latin or Greek or Aramaic, So despite Czechs had translated it like 1 century before that. For them, Hussites were heretics. And when Luther finally came back to England, believing that things may have changed, still he was executed in 1536, despite at that time England was not Catholic anymore, and Henry VIII was not Catholic. But we'll come to that point. What happened? Common people usually confess to Calvinist ideas, thanks to John Knox and other of these preachers coming back from Geneva, and they were called Puritans. Actually, bad luck, they had only like once a short period of a king of their own religion, so most of the time they were escaping to exile to the Netherlands, especially, or to the New World, like this Mayflower colonies or Pilgrim Fathers. Even Henry the Eighth, he married to Catholic queen, or upcoming queen of Spain, Catherine of Aragon. She was actually sister of upcoming king of Spain, Philip of Habsburg family, and she gave him a daughter. Her name was Maria, but the problem was that Catherine was much older than this Henry, and obviously, due to her age, she couldn't give him more kids and couldn't give him male heir. What's supposed to be the main matter? Not matter of faith, but matter of son. And Henry, now very decent that they didn't have any more kids, so he realized that proper religion is not so important. That not important, more important than the following of the line of the house of the Tudors. So for that reason, for the higher age of his wife, he asked his pen friend, Pope Innocent, for the annulment of their marriage, so kind of divorce. But Pope, imagine if he had given agreement for the divorce of a Spanish queen, how would Spain reacted? Spain at the time was the most powerful, the biggest country in the world, from Mexico to the Philippines, sending their armies all around Europe to fight the Protestants and even Ottoman Turks. He couldn't do that. So for that reason, he refused that. And now, decent over the divorce, Henry started to say, okay, probably I'm doing like by myself. And despite he was the only ruler, there was a parliament, but there was also kind of a royal council. And hand of the king, or the councillors of the king, were also important personalities. Among them, there was Sir Thomas More, his chancellor, who started to criticize him. And 1 year after his the Henry's divorce with the Catholic Church, he actually decided and started his nice way of solution, like interesting way of solution of the problems, to send your opponents to death, to execute and to be beheaded, so to be cut off your head. So this is the way that Thomas More, when he was criticizing him, despite he was famous humanist Catholic scholar, so he was executed in 1535. Actually, year before that, Henry had decided to make this divorce also with the church, so he can make divorce with Catherine of Aragon. For that reason, he proclaimed and created the establishment of Ecclesia Anglica, which means the Church of England. And that was brand new church for England only, and he established his own supremacy. It means that the head of the church, it means with the right of appointing bishops, archbishops, and actually introducing dogmas, would be his own right. And this is called the Supramessi Act, or the first Supramessi Act of 1534, tzv. Supremačný zákon. My by sme vedeli, prekladatelia tlmočníci, lepšie preložiť nejaký že zákon o zvrchovanosti, nadradenosti alebo riadení cirkvi, anglikánskej, ako budeme nazývať. But the thing is that he established actually brand new church. And with what a big surprise, it became very successful. For what reasons? Firstly, this Anglican church left Catholic liturgy. So Catholics actually, for them, from this religious, theological point of view, actually nothing changed. He introduced some Protestant ideas that Catholics didn't mind, and thus Protestants and Puritans were happy about this. On the other hand, he abolished all monastic orders and these offices of bishops and archbishops, so they were dissolved, and all their land, because it was maybe 1/3 of the land of the Bishop of Canterbury and monastic orders of Benedictines and Dominicans in England, so they actually confiscated the land, so he could actually distribute land to the people who supported him. Then he started with persecution of Catholics and of Puritans both, so they were not happy for a long time. And for all these, he gained great support from nobility and from towns. So all the members of parliament were happy. There are no bishops and archbishops sitting in the parliament. Why? Because usually they were actually spies and the hands of the Pope and Catholics. So for that reason, they were happy. And the second and main reason was that 1/3 of the land confiscated from the church and monastic orders were distributed, divided among the nobility and among the towns. For that reason, towns had place to spread, to build like their huge settlements, and for nobility, they could actually start up their own businesses and trade and sheep growing and so on. For that reason, they supported king, and parliament was happy about this situation. Of course, what happened? What happened in here was that now Henry could finally go divorce with his wife, that she was sent to some tower to exile to live life, but she decided like to go to Spain, but later on she died in here. So sad, angry queen raising her daughter, an upcoming queen actually of England, with a terrible hate against her father, logically. So from his court ladies around, he could pick up not some foreign queen or princess, but from court ladies here in England, and he picked up Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn became his like favorite, and she gave him a baby. But the problem was she gave him another daughter, and her name was Elizabeth, and that would be upcoming great queen of England. Uh, but what found to be later, he was not interested in her very much later on, and he decided to find himself another wife from the court. For that reason, they need some accusation, even fake accusation, against Anne Boleyn, and the historians mostly agree upon that she was not cheating on her husband, but that was just a fake information about her. What he decided, just like with Sir Thomas More or William Tyndale, was that he sent her to death, and she was beheaded as one of two wives. Jane Seymour was his another favorite, and she finally gave him son, Prince Edward, who was king after him for a very short period of the time. But Jane Seymour died. Then he picked up another very young and the only blonde hair that you cannot see her. According to people of those times, she was like the prettiest of all six wives and of Cleves, but she died soon. Finally, there was Catherine Howard. Catherine Howard was another, but probably she knew that it's not very safe to be the Queen of England of their time. So when there were rumors and gossips in occurred that she is cheating on him, that she knew that probably he's again bored of hers. So she actually asked for forgiveness, and she would like resign and go somewhere to the tower, and she will lock there. And for that reason, he agreed, and this is how she saved her life. And as the only wife, she survived him, because Catherine Parr was the last one, and she was executed again because some like cheating affairs and so on. So this is how six wives of Henry VIII when he died. So there was the only last queen, and of course she was like got rid of very soon. Now, very quickly, when is that? So there is one male heir, and that was at the time 10 years old boy, Edward, now becoming the King Edward the Sixth. But as you can see, he was ruling only for 6 years. The problem was that he was not very healthy, and the issue of many of royal families, they had some connections, so he was not very healthy, and he died as only like 16 years old. Logically, he didn't have chance to bring like some male heir to the throne. So his rule went to his stepsisters. And this is interesting because now three children of Henry VIII, the Tudor, had three different confessions. Edward VI, after his mother, was a Calvinist. And because Puritans were not like, he was like, his actually, the council was ruling for him, so he respected Puritans and Anglicans and Catholics all, no problem. Okay. But when he died, then the rule went to the oldest sister, stepsister, to the Mary, and Mary, full of hate, Catholic, she started with counter-reformation and very strict, what we in Slovak called recatholization. So they started big persecution of Anglicans and of Puritans both. Even to support this, like Catholicism, she married his own brother or cousin, I can't remember, Philip of Spain. So for a short period, Spain and England were personal union. Actually, there was no chance for any action like to use it because immediately the Parliament and Royal Council started to organize a planned conspiracy against her to get rid of the throne because Mary started to be like paranoid against schizophrenia, and the persecution was so bad that she was given a nickname the Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Not only this tomato juice drink with vodka, but even this one. Uh, the thing was that in the end of her life, when she was already like really mad and she suffered a lot, so the councils persuaded her to accept the visit of her stepsister Elizabeth. She was living in like secret in exile in one of the mansions, and Elizabeth was persuaded to talk to her sister, but she was in prison. But later, Mary got like moment of like rational mind, clean mind, so she accepted the audience from Elizabeth, and Elizabeth was behaving to her like to sister. And she they were talking to each other, and Elizabeth told like, I hate my father the same you hate him. He also actually he even not only he abandoned my mom, but he sent her to death. And despite the fact I'm Anglican, but we are sisters. We can listen to each other. Those of you, you have sisters. I got two sisters. You know they are the greatest listeners, the greatest support every time. So this sisterhood, was kind of thing that Mary finally accepted just before the end of her life to accept and proclaim Elizabeth, her youngest stepsister, as the new Queen of England, which happened after her death in 1558. Actually, Mary the Catholic became like new, uh, like common queen, but Elizabeth the First of Sussex, as you see, for almost more than 40 years, 45 years overall, became the greatest, the grandest monarch in English history. Not Richard the Lionheart, not James the Sixth, or not Elizabeth. The second contemporary queen, but this one, Elizabeth the First, was the beginning and the great power of England and British Empire later on. Immediately she started with strict restoration of Anglican Church, which was the second Supramessi Act in 1559. So there were two Supramessi Acts that you need to remember, and in this way she restored it. Of course, for the country of those who ruled there in the parliament, it was okay. Puritans, they mostly again went to exile to Netherlands, later to the New World, to America. Catholics, they just vanished, vanquished. They were vanquished in England, and Elizabeth started to rule in here. Very quickly, I have to see how many minutes I have. It will be 1 or 2 minutes. So there were many things about Elizabeth to be mentioned, and what is interesting, she refused all marriage offers from all the Europe, even Spanish King Philip II, who was actually her brother-in-law, step-brother-in-law. When Mary died, so he asked her sister to marry him. She refused that. Also against Anglican Church, for that he organized a huge Spanish fleet called Armada to attack England. The other reason was that English Navy was attacking Spanish galleons, huge ships carrying silver and gold from New World to Europe, and these pirate raids organized by Francis Drake, one of the lovers of Queen Elizabeth I, that probably one of the lovers. So he was appointed to be sire, and he was sent for the second voyage around the world, that you may remember. Actually, this invasion to England completely failed because of the great tactics that Francis Drake, as main admiral of English Navy, organized, with the ships emptied by sailors heading towards the formation of Spanish ships full of explosives, set on flames. This you've seen in Game of Thrones, maybe, and this is idea from this one, and it failed. And then, because of very bad weather, Spanish Armada had to sail around British Isles, and when they want to embark in Ireland, started in here. Okay, my log is now in here, so it's the end of the lesson. So because of storms, most of the navy was sunk, so only few ships came back. This defeat caused this defeat caused that Elizabethan era, not Elizabethan, but Elizabethan era became the probably most famous period in English history. Her reign then was period of stability in economy, growing power of England in the seas. William Shakespeare and of course even Christopher Marlowe became symbols of the rise of culture, and thus English national identity was forged with us. So now Elizabeth, with Spanish Armada defeated in the windows and her hand laid on the western hemisphere of the globe. Here, King, not King, but Tsar Ivan IV the Terrible, showing English ambassador his chambers full of treasures, but she refused him. And then Ivan IV the Terrible claimed that I do not want this lady, that this queen, she's not even queen when she had to obey some parliamentarians, some guys who don't have even blue blood. Next lesson, guys, we are moving to the Netherlands, Dutch Reformation, and even later on to 30 Years War. That will be probably the last lesson. So that's all for me, guys. I believe I will be able to split these two lessons together, and you can enjoy the lesson. So have a nice day, guys. Enjoy Easter holidays, or probably it is after your Easter holidays. So uh, stay negative, intense, and positive in mind. Bye bye.